As a mortgage note investor, eventually you're going to have to come against the challenge of having to foreclose on one of your borrowers. Whether you buy performing notes or you buy non-performing notes where there's a chance or a higher chance of foreclosure, no matter what, you're going to have some situations where your borrowers stop making payments, and you're going to have to come up against the somewhat difficult situation of foreclosing on your borrower. And unless you're just completely heartless, it can be a challenge for anyone when they have to foreclose on your borrower, because that means that they're going to have to lose their home. They're going to have to move out, find a different place to live. And oftentimes, good things happen to good people. People come, job loss, health issues, divorces, death of a family member. We just all saw a pandemic come through. So things can happen to good people that cause them to get in financial situations where they can't make their payments. And unfortunately or fortunately, as a note investor, we're not a charity, right? So there's a fine line to navigate between, everyone wants to be a good person. We want to be able to accommodate our borrowers. We don't want to see them lose their homes. We want to be able to be flexible and work with them to come up to some sort of solution to their problem so that they can stay in their home. But at the same time, we don't want to be pushovers. We don't want to be a charity and have certain borrowers take advantage of us either, take advantage of our kindness, because in those situations, then you're putting your own investment and your own note investing business on the line. And we don't want to be so compassionate that we end up, hurting our own businesses. So it's a fine line to walk between being accommodating to borrowers that are in trouble, being flexible, being willing to work with them, but also having them take advantage of your kindness and push you too far to the point where you're losing money. And that part, in those situations, it might not be for everyone to be in this business, because you're going to eventually have to stand firm and go through the process of a foreclosure, okay? And so in some of those situations, that's where you can rely on your legal team. So your attorneys can handle the foreclosure process, and they can kind of maybe be the bad cop in a sense, as well as maybe even having to contact the sheriff in order to evict that person from the property. But so sometimes we have to rely on our team, especially if you know your personality and you know that you're not the kind of person that can stand firm and face conflict when telling these people what they need to hear. But some of the ways that we can approach a foreclosure if we are a lender and we have mortgage notes and we're foreclosing is some of the ways to help our borrowers have a soft landing if it comes to a foreclosure are, number one, knowing how the foreclosure process works ahead of time as the note investor. So that's usually just talking to a foreclosure attorney, doing your research ahead of time so that you know the steps involved in a foreclosure ahead of time. And communicating those steps, or having your attorney communicate those steps, or your servicing company, whoever it is that's reaching out to your borrower, making sure that they're communicating clearly so that the borrower understands what's happening. Because that's the scariest part. That's the part that causes people to act maybe irrationally or aggressively, is if they have fear and if they don't understand what's happening to them. And so if we're able to approach them in a kind way and communicate effectively what they're facing, what the foreclosure process looks like, what their rights are, how a foreclosure is going to affect them, how it'll affect their credit. The more information you can give people, the hope is that they'll be able to make better choices for themselves and possibly be willing to work with you to come to a mutual solution. So the main thing that a lot of note investors would like to negotiate with a potential borrower, I think, in most cases, is a deed in lieu of foreclosure. And so what that means is you can negotiate with your borrower to deed the property back to you. That's one of your rights as a lender, is they can deed the property back to you because you are the lender. And then that allows them to skip the foreclosure process. So your borrower can get away without having a foreclosure on their credit, which is going to affect their credit score and their ability to get a new property or, any kind of loan, financing a vehicle. even sometimes renting a property. If they have a bad credit score, some landlords won't rent to them. So it can affect them in a very negative way. But if you're willing to communicate and negotiate with your borrower, it may be in their best interest and your best interest to negotiate a deed in lieu where you get the property back. And oftentimes that comes with maybe giving them some cash for keys. So giving them some money to vacate, maybe pay for moving costs, maybe pay for the deposit on a new place to rent, but just help them get on their feet in exchange for them deeding you the property. And that saves the entire foreclosure process for both of you. So that's always something we want to try to negotiate with your borrower, and trying to help them, as I said, get off to the, on a positive footing when they move out of the house. And so that's one thing that real estate investors can get very good at, is creatively, but also just having resources that maybe these borrowers don't have, whether that's a moving company, whether that's, other landlords in your network that have vacant properties that your borrower can rent out. But also helping them get back on their feet if they do go through a foreclosure, helping them get back on their feet by maybe connecting them with some credit counseling so that they can work on improving their credit quicker so that they can eventually become homeowners again. Or maybe just like, personal finance type courses and training and that kind of thing, so that they can start over in a better way, with more knowledge on how to better balance their own personal finances. And sometimes it might be flexibility in renting the property out to them for a few months until they can find a place. Sometimes that can be tricky because they can start taking advantage of you. But, maybe being flexible if you do take the property back in a deed in lieu or an REO, maybe allowing them to stay in the property and pay you rent for a few months until they find a new place to live. But again, we don't want to be to the point where they're taking advantage of us. And then the other thing that a lot of people don't understand is foreclosure excess proceeds. And I actually have another business where we help people who've gone through a foreclosure recover the excess proceeds after a foreclosure. And so you can actually educate your borrower that if you foreclose and sell the property off at the auction, at the foreclosure auction, if they have a significant amount of equity and the property is worth quite a bit more than they owe you on the note or on the mortgage, you can instruct them and help them to be able to recover those excess proceeds, because they are entitled to that money. Anything over and above the amount that's owing to you on the note, so the principal balance and any late fees, back payments, attorney fees, all of that, but anything up over and above that should legally belong to the borrower if the property sells for an amount higher than that at the foreclosure auction. Now, the one case there is if they have other liens or judgments against them, maybe a second mortgage on the property or judgments against them or on the property, liens on the property, then those lien holders would have a claim to that money. But if there are no liens, then that money would be going to the borrower. And if they don't know this, then they may miss out on that money. So just by having that information and being able to educate your borrower, say, look, if we go through this foreclosure, I can guide you so that you can get some of your equity back so that you can take that money and better yourself in the future. So just being as knowledgeable as possible about the entire process will help. And then if you can become a clear communicator with your borrowers and treat them with kindness and respect, the hope is that they will do the same back to you, and you'll be able to help them get off on the right footing. You'll be able to help them leave the property in good condition, because that's a big thing for you. If you end up taking the property back, you don't want them damaging the property. And if you act like an asshole towards them, they're probably going to act like an asshole back to you and maybe damage the property if you take it back. So it's all about kindness, but also being firm enough that they don't take advantage of you, but helping them get through this part of their lives, which is probably not a positive one. And you can create some win-wins.